the knowledge we want you to have are all captured in the objectives. Anytime you set out objective, your aim is to achieve them. So if you want to find out whether you have achieved them or not, it is examination. So examinations are based on the objectives of the course. So pay critical attention to them. When you are reading, you ask yourself, have I achieved the objective that are outlined for me? Okay. So our first objective is to, sorry. So at the end of this semester's course, we expect each and every one of you to be able to provide an introduction to theories of economic behavior in the labor market. At least you should know some theories that explains the behavior of individuals in the labor market. And then you should also be able to summarize and explain the empirical evidence on these theories. How applicable are the theories in the labor market? So we'll try and link whatever we'll do, whatever theory we'll look at to the empirical world. Then should also be able to provide a description of the Ghanaian labor market and an analysis of recent policy in the light of this theory and evidence. So how is it linked to Ghana's labor market? Are the theories explaining what is happening in Ghana's labor market? We'll try and explain or link it to that effect. Then to also demonstrate an understanding of the economic principles behind the operation of the labor market. What economic principle is helping us to explain or understand how the labor market operates? You should also be able to describe and explain relevant empirical evidence on the operations of the labor market. Then to demonstrate an understanding of recent development in the Ghanaian labor market. And finally, critically evaluate the effectiveness of actual and proposed government policies towards the labor market. A number of policies have been put in place. How effective or how realistic are these policies? So these are the objectives or the specific objectives that you have to be able to understand at the end of this course. And the detailed outline, we have 8 topics to look at. The first will take us through overview of the labor market, some definitions and concepts, earnings of labor. There's a difference between wages and earnings. We'll look at all such concepts. Then labor demand and the wage elasticity of labor demand. The topic 2 is not that different from demand and supply that you've learned in level 100. Only that we are going to apply it to the labor market instead. Our third topic will extend or look at the extension of the theory of demand. We'll extend the labor demand to look at non-wage labor costs. sometimes you get certain incomes that are not directly from the economic activities that you have engaged in. How that affect demand for wages, and also how incomes that you are getting from sources other than work are influencing your supply for labor. Somebody is not working maybe all 8 hours or all 5 days because he has another source, which that source could be either pensions or some grants or government transfers or even family support. They can influence how somebody would want to supply his services for money. So we'll look at some of these interesting things. Then our fourth topic will take care of the supply of labor. Supply of labor. You can also say the decision to work. People decide to either participate in the labor market or not. And when they are deciding to participate, they also decide the number of hours that they should give out or they should supply to the work, and also decision regarding how much should they take or what will be their reservation wage. Before somebody gives you a job or you apply for a particular job or you accept a job offer, if you are able to answer the question of should I participate, the next question you ask yourself is at what wage. That is why some people decline certain job offers, because he knew that how much is going to be paid is less than his or her reservation wage. Your reservation wage is the wage at which you are not going to work when it falls below your expected wage. You expect to receive 19.97, which is the minimum wage in Ghana currently. And the person says, I'll pay you 18 Ghana cedis per day. The 19.97 ideally should be maybe your reservation wage. So anything below 19.97, you are not going to work. You are going to decline the offer. We'll look at some interesting theories that explains this. Then wage determination, how wages are determined, will be our fifth topic. How market forces like labor unions help to determine wages, how the tripartite committee, which is the minimum wage or wage determination committee in Ghana, how they help to determine the minimum wage. Then some theories like efficiency wage theory, theory of compensation, and the like. We are going to apply this or use those theories and those policies to determine how wages, to explain how wages are determined. Then our sixth topic will look at basic 21st century skills training needed in the labor market. So in the 21st century, certain skills are needed in the labor market. Employers are looking for people with such skills. Example, how to think critically, how to communicate effectively, and how to collaborate, or what we call collaboration skills, as well as creative skills or creative minds. We'll look at how this shapes the labor market. And the seventh and the eighth topics, we'll look at social protection. Social protection. The social wage and other benefits, working hours, vacations, holidays, and job securities. So those will be the aspects we'll look at regarding the social protection. How you are being paid, how you receive benefit, the number of hours you have to work, holidays that you have to go, what you call the annual leave and those ones. Then job securities, insurance, and those things that protect you at the workplace. Then finally, we'll do some simulation exercise or practical. We'll do some small practicals on how to measure direct employment. If, for example, government invests 200 million Ghana cedis into agricultural sector, how does this impact on employment? How many jobs is this going to create? The 200 million Ghana cedis, how is this going to create jobs? What we call the multiplier effect. Sometimes you hear that, especially when we started the food planting for food and jobs program, you hear all over that government is going to create, or the planting for food and job is going to create this also and so amount of jobs, even before the implementation. These are some of the simulations that were done to be able to know how much I should spend in an economy if I have to create certain number of jobs or create certain number of employment. We'll look at that practically using Excel. So these are the reading materials. There are 5 reading materials, but the main one is the first one, Ronald J. Ehrenberg and Robert S. Smith. That will be our main test, and the rest are supplementary reading materials. Mode of assessment, I think you know much about how you are always assessed. Okay, so let's leave that for code. Code will assess you. I'm not sure they will change their mode of assessment when you write quizzes and examination. Okay, so after class, I will share the course outline with you. I hope that's fine.
Yes, Doc.
Good. Okay, you can see the slides too, right?
Yes.
Great. All right, so we'll begin with the overview. First, look at what labor economics is. Then, once we talk about labor economics, we are always interested in looking at the major sources of our personal incomes, where you get your income from, and what determines your income. So, the major sources of your personal income is definitely from a job that you are embarking on, either your self-owned business or working for somebody. So once you are getting income from a source that is through employment or through your own self-establishment, you are still talking about labor economics. What determines the income? Why income differ from person to person? Even in the same organization, 10 people working, but they receive different salaries. Why are the wages, the earnings, or the salaries differ from one person to another? These are the issues that labor economics talks about. It also emphasizes on or deals with how we allocate the most important input. What are the inputs? You and I are the inputs, as well as any other factors relevant for production. So your allocation of important components of your production process, which are the inputs, labor economics also look at that. So they don't only look at the sources you are getting the money and what determines the money and why individuals' incomes differ. They also look at how to allocate the important resources of the setting or of the organization. So labor economics looks at the supply of labor services, how you and I supply our labor services, and how our employers also demand for our labor services. So it is about the supply and demand for labor and how to understand the way wages are determined, employment, and income. So the pattern of wages, the pattern of employment, the pattern of income of individuals are being influenced through how we demand for labor and how we supply labor. So for example, when I talk about pattern of wages as being influenced by demand and supply of labor, I'm simply talking about the fact that if we supply more of ourselves to the labor market, it will have an impact on the wages we are going to receive. If labor supply exceeds labor demand, then wages will definitely fall. If labor supply is less than labor demand, then wages will definitely rise. So that is the pattern. So it is the demand and the supply of labor that determines the wages in the market. It's just like your understanding of demand for goods and services, or demand and supply of goods and services, where at equilibrium, demand and supply determines the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity. Here, at equilibrium, they determine the wage and the number of jobs to be created, what we call employment. And once employment is achieved, then it means that what will follow up is income. You are going to receive income. You are going to receive either wages or you are going to receive earnings. So labor economics is basically helping us to understand how the sources we receive our incomes, what determines our income, why our income levels differ even though we are doing the same job, how we have to allocate the most critical resources that are needed for production processes, and then how demand and supply of labor determines the pattern of wages, employment, and our income. So it is also concerned with the behavior of employers and employees in response to the general incentives of wages, prices, profits, non-pecuniary, what we call monetary aspect of the employment. So how workers behave and how employers also behave with regards to how they have to construct wages, how they have to determine the price of what they are using labor to produce, and profit that they have to also make as a result. So these three variables, wage, prices, and profits, determines employment. They determine the number of people that can be employed. So if employers and employees behave in a certain way, especially a manner that will compromise on these three variables, it is going to have effect on the last variable, which is employment. If employees are bargaining harder, it means wages must rise. Once wages rises, employment will be affected. If employers cannot pay that high wages being requested for, then they have to cut down either employment or cease to employ. When the price of the final good that you are using the labor to produce or the employee to produce, when the prices are falling, it has effect on employment. I am producing watermelon juice for sale. I have 10 workers and the price of watermelon juice is going down. Demand has shattered. It means I cannot sell more to get more to pay my workers. And as a result, I may either decide to lay off or not employ. That is having effect on employment. And sometimes too, if workers strike for higher wages, to be able to pay them, especially when they are essential workers or they are technocrats, then to be able to accommodate these high wages is for you to increase the price of what you are selling so that you'll be able to make enough to pay them off. Increasing the price also has effect on demand for what you are selling. And once demand reduces, it means you cannot raise enough to pay your workers, which may lead to layoffs or constrain the ability of the firm to expand. So labor economists will analyze all these variables and look at how they implicate or they affect the level of employment. So let's look at some examples of important issues we will consider in this course. We'll look at minimum wage or the living wage. What is the minimum wage or what is the living wage? The minimum wage is that lowest amount that you have to receive if you work for someone per day. And in Ghana, it is being determined by the tripartite committee. A number of factors are considered in either adjusting the minimum wage. It is 19.97 as we speak. It means that if you employ somebody, the lowest per day you have to give to that person is 19.7. And this is often for the unskilled workers, okay, what we call the low skilled workers, people who don't have the needed skills, whose services can be rendered by almost everyone. Okay. This was an increase from 18.15 in 2024. This was the minimum wage in 2024, 18.15 Ghana cedis. So 18 cedis, 15 pesos. Then it increased to 19.97, which is about 10% increase. If you look at it historically, from 2014 to 2025, 2014, the minimum wage was around 6 Ghana cedis. 2015, it increased by 1 cedi to 7 Ghana cedis. 2018, it increased by 1 cedi to 8 Ghana cedis. 2019, it maintained. 2016, 8 Ghana cedis. 2017, same 8 Ghana cedis. 2019, it increased to 10 cedis, 65 pesos. So that is the historical antecedents of how our minimum wages have been changing. How is this determined? So when we get to wage determination, we'll look at the factors that influence the determination or that goes into the minimum wage determination. So if you look at it critically, our minimum wage increment has just been 1 cedis few pesos, 1 cedis few pesos. There's no single year that the minimum wage since 2014 to date, the rate of increase from one period to another has been up to 2 Ghana cedis. It is 1 Ghana cedis and some few pesos. But the relevant question here when it comes to minimum wage is that does the minimum wage cost jobs? The minimum wage, does it cost job or jobs? Does increase in the minimum wage affect the ability of firms to employ more? And does the increase in the minimum wage reduces poverty? So can someone respond to some of these questions or any of these questions? I asked 2 questions. Does the minimum wage cost jobs? And if it does, how?
Okay, I want to respond to the first question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that minimum wage costs jobs in the sense that, assuming I'm an employer and I'm to
Mm,
employ 5 people to do a work for me,
yeah.
now because the minimum wage has been fixed at 19 cities, 97 pesos, I
Mm,
will look at my account as to whether if I employ these 5 people, I'll be able to pay all of them per day. So
mm,
if I cannot, then it means I have to reduce the number of people that I will employ. So in this case,
okay.
I may be able to employ only 2 out of the 5 that I initially wanted to employ. So it has affected the number of people that I initially wanted to employ. So I think minimum wage affect employment. Thank you, Doc.
Good submission. Thank you very much. That's good. Yes, it affects, just as he has explained. So it means that when we are pushing, especially those of us in already, in existing employment, or we are employed already, when we are pushing harder for an increase in our salaries or our wages, then it means that we are denying others access to employment. Could that also be right? Could that also be right? That as we bargain harder for increase or increment in our salaries or our wages, it means there's a trade-off. We are pushing others also to unemployment.
Yes.
Could that be
Yes,
right?
sir.
Yes, Doc.
Good. So this means that if our children are looking for jobs and we are also asking for increment in our salaries, then it means there's going to be a trade-off. As we call for increment in salary, we are also denying the opportunity to our children to get employment. That is the trade-off between increment in wages and job losses or increase in unemployment. So it means that what is happening in recent times, for example, um, nurses and teachers calling for what is due them that the government is not paying. Those who have never worked before are looking for jobs, and those who have jobs are also calling for increment in salaries. It means we have to understand the fact that there's going to be a trade-off. We cannot achieve all these 3 scenarios at the same time. I have worked for 10 months, you have not paid me, which I have the right to receive my money. You have to. I have always been getting my salary, but I think it's not enough. Increase it for me. That is the group 2. And group 1 are those people who are yet to enter the labor market. They are looking for a job, they are not getting. So there's going to be a trade-off. As you are increasing the salary of group 2, it is going to affect the ability to employ group 1. And do you think when the minimum wage increases, it can reduce the level of poverty? Does increase in minimum wage reduces the level of poverty? Who will help with that one? Yes. Yes. Who will help with that? Hello. Does increase in minimum wage reduces poverty? So when the
Yes, sir.
okay, go ahead.
I said if the minimum wage increases and
Mhm.
is able to take me home,
Okay,
meaning my house is going to be in a good living standard because I can buy what at the beginning I cannot buy,
okay,
and my family living standard will improve.
okay. All right. So it means that
Okay.
minimum wage. Okay, somebody wants to give an opinion. Yeah.
Please, as you rightfully said that since it's going to lead to trade-off,
Mm-hmm.
most people are in the houses.
Mm-hmm.
So when they see that there is an increment in a particular job,
Mm-hmm.
at least they will also try to get the job. And
Mm-hmm.
as they are being taken or being employed, it also reduces poverty.
Okay.
And those in the job sector too, since there is an increment,
Mm-hmm.
they also feel it's okay and can take care of the family, which also can reduce poverty at their house as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Then what about those people who may not be able to get job as a result of others calling for increase in minimum wage? There's a trade-off. So the level of poverty may improve for those who are having the job and they are getting the increase in the minimum wage. But those who do not have job yet will continue not to have the job, and their level of poverty will also be affected. So there's also a trade-off here. Let me give you some statistics when it comes to the case of Ghana. For example, I'm going to do comparison of the minimum wage over the years vis-a-vis extreme poverty levels in Ghana. In 2018, let me use 2018 as an example. The number of persons, the minimum wage was 8 Ghana cedis. And the number of persons living in extreme poverty, 6,515. Extreme poverty means this person cannot live on a 3 square meal a day. They cannot live on 3 square meal a day. In 2017, minimum wage was maintained at 8 Ghana cedis. And the level of extreme poverty, 6,543, which is an increase of about 30. In 2018, the minimum wage increased to 9 cedis 68 pesos. And the level of poverty, extreme poverty, also increased to 6,583. In 2019, the level of poverty to 6,002. It fell drastically. But between 2019 and 2020, 2019 minimum wage 10 cedis 65 pesos, and the level of extreme poverty 6,002. 2020 minimum wage 11 cedis 82 pesos, and the level of poverty 6,346. 2021 minimum wage increased to 12 cedis 53 pesos, and the level of poverty 6,567. It even increased to 13.53 in 2022. 13 cities, 53 pesos, and the level of poverty, extreme poverty, 6,608. This can go on and on and on and on. What am I communicating here? So you can see that the pattern of minimum wage increase and poverty level is undulating. We have periods it fails and periods it increase. But if you look at the overall trend from 2018 to 2025, it clearly shows that even as minimum wages are going up, the level of poverty are also going up. The overall trend. So it means increase in minimum wage, so far as Ghana is concerned, is not necessarily reducing the level of poverty. For example, if you look at the statistics, it is 1 Ghana cedis. Every year we increase it by 1 cedi, or 1 cedi few pesos. The data I have chanced on, I have not seen a year where our minimum wage increased by 2 Ghana cedis. It's 1 cedi something pesos, or exactly 1 cedi. And this may be insufficient to reduce the level of poverty of those who are even going to enjoy this increment. And at the same time, it is also going to affect people who must be employed. So there's a trade-off between calling for salary increment or calling for wage increment and the amount of job that can be created. And even with respect to the level of poverty. Does college pay? So if you attend a university, does it pay? What I mean is, if you compare the opportunity cost of you attending a university for 4 years, can you determine the rate of return on your investment on education? You have spent about, let's say, let me assume 30,000 in taking yourself from a degree program at the university. Given what you can use that 30,000 to do, given that you can use it to do something else, comparing it with the college that you have instead use it for, can you be able to determine the return on your investment? Can you tell me how much you have, whether you have made profit on the education that you have taken yourself through, the work you are doing, you train yourself before having that job? Is the job paying? Have you been able to recoup your investment and making some returns? The answer may be yes, but you cannot tell me the exact. What this means is, to take a decision, you must always weigh options. You look at the opportunity cost of the decision you are taking vis-a-vis others. If the return on the investment is going to be positive or is going to be worthwhile, then you have to proceed and invest. If the return is not going to be profitable, then you have to retreat. We know that immigration and globalization is also affecting employment. That is why you see our people at Abosokai fighting the Nigerians. Their presence in the country to them is affecting their jobs. That is why you see people at UK, at Canada are protesting. South Africa are protesting. The foreigners are taking over their jobs. So minimum wage can be impacted through immigration. When foreigners are trooping into your country, it can affect the minimum wage, especially in the industry that the skills of these immigrants can fit. You know, our people travel abroad and they do the kind of job they get are often the low skills jobs, not the high skills job. It's the low skills jobs. And the low skills jobs are often a reserve for people, the natives or the nationals who could not train themselves or who could not acquire some high skills to be able to get a decent job. So, for example, let's use cleaning. If cleaning is the job classified as low skills job that you don't need certificate to do in, say, South Africa, and you have a number of African countries who don't also have skills, whose qualification can only permit them to do the same cleaning job. When they move from this African country to South Africa, meaning they are going to compete with the South Africans who are supposed to be doing these cleaning jobs. And that will bring conflict. That can affect the minimum wage. It can bring the minimum wage down because labor supply in that sector is going to increase. So immigration and globalization is also shaping the issues of employment and minimum wage determination.
Sir,
Yes, please.
sir,
Yes.
please, I want to know.
Yeah.
You initially made it clear to us that uh, these factors that we are talking about may make a company or may lead a company into laying off some of its workers.
Mm.
So I want to know what could also be the cause of a company embarking on some sort of redundancy. Because I think there is a difference between laying off a worker and that of redundancy. Will these factors also influence redundancy?
Yes, it can. It can. They can ask you to, you go home and stay for some few months, we'll call you back. Or you'll be at work, but you don't have any effective work doing. So it can. Minimum wage can also cause that. Especially, I want to believe that, it is this period that I cannot pay. But I have to put some strategies or measures in place to come back stronger. So that I would, because I don't want to lose my every company has technocrats. If I have to use that word, technocrat, they have the brain or the engine of the company. So if minimum wage will affect me in keeping all these people, then it means that in order not to lose them, having the hope that things will change going forward, I have to not totally sack these people, but some of these redundancies can occur. Are you getting it? So
Sure.
we are not saying that it is only the minimum wage that is causing all these issues of either redundancy or layoff of workers or temporary seizure unemployment. No, there are other factors, a number of them, which I think you know. But we want to narrow our discussions to the labor market. all right, which is the human beings.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, so
Thank
it
you
can,
very much.
yeah, it causes a lot of redundancies. All right, so some basic definitions that we have to also know. For example, we talk about national labor market, local labor market, and internal labor market. They are different. The functionality is the same, but they are applied in different contexts. Once I talk about national labor market, it is irrespective of the industry, irrespective of the region, irrespective of the kind of job. So putting all the employable markets together, that becomes the national labor market. So where buyers and sellers search to the entire nation for each other. That is the national labor market. And the local one, you can maybe talk about Ashanti region, right? You can talk about Eastern region. You can talk about the Central region or any of the regions. You can talk about those ones or look at those ones as the local labor market, where you don't go beyond your boundaries. Then we have the internal labor market. The internal labor market is within organization. For example, if you pick Unilever Ghana, within Unilever Ghana, right, you have those people who have the high skills, and you have those people who have the low skills. And you know that this could breed differences in wages within the same organization. So this market has regulations within the organizations of firms that enable its workers to earn more or less than other counterparts in same organization. Some earn more than others based on the skills that they possess. Within the universities, same thing happens. We have TEU, we have UTAC, and we even have those who are the administrations. So salary will differ based on the kind of job you do and the skills that you are offering. So we have three basic labor market: the national, the local, and the national, the local, and the internal. We also have secondary labor markets. This market is considered as informal. In the secondary labor market, it is informal because there's often no agreement, or if you like, written document that stipulates the responsibility, the working conditions, the salary you will pay, your promotion structure, and so on. In the secondary labor market, you don't have such arrangement. It's just like a construction firm. You go and carry blocks, you go and carry whatever, and then you get your money, you go your way. There's no well structure or any proper arrangement that defines your responsibility, your salary structure, how we are going to increase your salary over time, your working conditions, how you are going to be promoted. You don't see some of these structures in the secondary labor market. Then we have the formal labor market, which is characterized by written agreement. The formal one, where written agreement, you get appointment letter, everything will be in that letter. And the organization will have a structure put in place ensuring how you are going to be promoted, or even how your salary is going to be adjusted, maybe every year or every 2 months or every 5 years, right? Then we have the labor force. These are part of the concept. The labor force, we're talking about those individuals who are of age and are willing to work. Indeed, they should be employed or unemployed. Once I am of age and I have the ability to work, whether I am employed or unemployed, I am part of the labor force. when you look at the International Labour Organization, ILO standard, the working class starts from the age of 16, but Ghana, we know it is 18 years. Okay, there is some conflict or some conflicting issues when it comes to this. Ghana's ASCA service often uses the 16 or 15 years whenever they are looking at labor issues, when we know for sure that somebody at age 16 cannot be employed in Ghana because you are not qualified. Okay, so there's some issues regarding this labor force participation, age determination when it comes to who is qualified to be part of the labor force. So about 16 years of age, this will be the international one. But for the case of Ghana, you should be 18 years and above. You should be fit. You should also be willing to work. If you are in this category, then you are part of the labor force. Then we have the labor intensity. Labor intensity. We are talking about the magnitude of effort that the person you have employed or labor will apply to the work, the level of intensity, the eagerness, okay, the degree of effort. So when you look at the population dynamics of a country, it can tell or it can determine the intensity of labor. A youthful population will have very high degree of effort or labor intensity, right? Compared to a growing population. If your population is an adult population or a growing population, then it means that you have a number of your labor force falling outside the bracket of the stipulated age bracket where you can work to support your economy. This is why most of the foreign countries allow us from Africa to come to their economy and support them, because their intensity of labor is very, very low. They have aging or growing population. So let's also be clear. It's not everyone that is considered to be part of the labor force. So let's look at the people who are not considered to be part of the labor force. People who do not have jobs and are not willing or are not looking for jobs are not part of the labor force. So if today we're talking about labor issues and we want to look at the number of people who are in the labor force, once for you have declared that for you are not going to look for job because you are discouraged. Sometimes the discouragement will come as a result of, over the years, he has been trying to get job, but he's not getting it. Once you are in that category, you are classified not to be part of the labor force. And those who are mentally and physically challenged and therefore cannot work, not just the fact that you are mentally, you are physically challenged, but the mental aspect. The mental aspect. Once you cannot mentally and physically work, you are also not part of the labor force. We have people who are physically challenged, but they are qualified to work. So it is not only the physically challenged that is the issue, but the mental and physical. Only that kind of power would be to me the argument. So you have to be taken out of the labor force. But if the mental is okay and it is the physical, for example, the person, to say, uses a wheelchair or cannot walk, that does not affect the brain. The person can still work. So we have a lot of disabled people who are working. So the mental is the emphasis. In the recent call to the bar graduation ceremony that was conducted, I saw some few, I think about 3 or 4 physically challenged individuals who have been called to the bar. Blind people called to the bar. And I was so happy. That is very fantastic. Some people could not pass to the bar, even though they have all aspects functioning properly. They were not called to the bar because they failed their entrance exams. Okay, so it is the mental aspect that is the problem, but not the physical aspect. People who are not waiting to be recalled for layoff by their employers are also not part of the labor force. Then we have labor force participation rate. The labor force participation rate. It is the ratio between the labor force and the overall size of the population. So labor force divided by the population is the labor force participation rate. So if you are able to determine the labor force, you divide that by the number of population or the size of the population, then you'll be able to determine the people who actively participate, the rate, the percentage of people in the population who are qualified to participate in the labor force. Then we have quality of labor and quantity of labor. The quality of labor is the degree of skills applied to the job. Quality of labor, your skills, how you've been able to train and retrain yourself in a particular field to become an expert or to become more efficient in executing your job. That is the quality. This person does his task or her task perfectly or excellently. He knows what he's up to. But the quantity, we are looking at 2 things. Quantity is looking at the number of hours. The quantity is looking at the number of hours that you and I will give up or will give to a particular job, or the number of persons who are in the labor force. So 2 things. Either the number of hours you are willing to offer is what we are interested in, or the number of people who are qualified to be in the labor force. The quantity and the quality. We are still on the basic terminologies. Wages. Once we talk about wage, we are talking about per unit of time, payment per unit of time, or payment for a unit of time. So this definition is for the West, but ours would be payment for a day, because we pay in a day. Our minimum or our wage is per day, is not per hour. Okay, so payment per day is the wage for our case, but elsewhere it is payment per time, because they pay their wages timely. Every hour you are being paid certain amount. On average, if you look at America, on average, the minimum hourly wage is around $15 to $18 per hour. Okay, and ours is per day 19.97. So that is the variation. Then we have earnings. Earnings are the wages multiplied by the number of times units, typically the hours that you have worked. So if I multiply the number of times I have worked, if I am being paid per time every 1 hour, and I've worked for 4 hours, okay, and you are paying me every hour $18, then 4 times $18 is going to be my earnings. I've worked for just 4 hours for the whole period, and every hour is $18. So if I multiply, I get my earnings. So the earnings is more or less the accumulation of all your wages over the period that you have worked, right? In the case of Ghana, it is not going to be per time, it's per day. So if every day is 19.97 and you have worked for 22 to 23 days, then you multiply 19.97 by the 23 to 22 days, and that will determine your earnings. So the earnings is just like your salary. So there's a difference between wages and earnings. Then compensation, earnings and employee benefit. So benefit that you receive, the compensation could be part of your salary, it could be part of some extra benefit that you have to receive, right, from your employer. And the compensation can be either cash or in kind. It can be cash or it can be in kind. Then we have income. These concepts are being explained because we are going to use them or apply them somewhere. So we have income. This is the total command over resources of a person or family during some period of time. So given a year, the whole year, how much do you have? That is the income. How much do you have the whole year? That is your income. Or at a particular period of time, how much do you have in your account or how much do you have in your house? That is your income. So there's also difference between your income and your salary or your earnings. It is the accumulation of your earnings and or salaries that will determine your income. Your wages will determine your earnings, whilst your earnings over a period of time summed will also determine your income. Then we have marginal revenue product. Marginal revenue product. Marginal revenue product is simply the changes in your total revenue times the price of a product. Let me use definitional. I mean the formula to explain marginal revenue product. It's your marginal revenue times price. This is how we determine marginal revenue product, which we'll look at very soon. What this means is that the marginal revenue is the additional revenue that you are going to raise from an additional output sale. So if I sell 2 boxes of an item and I am getting 14 Ghana cedis, and I sell the 3rd box and I am getting 18 Ghana cedis, then the difference between the 18 and the 14, which is 4 Ghana cedis, is the additional revenue, which is the marginal revenue. So the additional revenue from the additional unit sale will give you your marginal revenue. So if you multiply your marginal revenue by the price of the product, then you are getting the marginal revenue product. The marginal revenue product. So it's the change in total revenue resulting from employing 1 more unit of a factor of production, while the quantity of all other factors remain constant. How selling more of additional unit of a commodity increases your revenue. That is the marginal revenue, additional revenue. And then the marginal factor cost. It is also the additional cost in employing additional unit of a factor in production. So before you increase production from 2 to 3, it means you have to also increase resources from a certain quantity. Let's say to produce 2 boxes, you need 10 tons of that resources. But to produce 3 boxes, you need, let's say, 15 tons. So the difference between the 10 and the 15 is 5. So this 5 tons of resources you have used, how much did it cost you? That is the additional cost. So marginal factor cost is the addition to a firm's total cost of production due to the employment of an additional unit of a factor of production. You are a Sobolo seller. You produce a bottle of Sobolo, it costs you 2 Ghana cedis. If you produce 2 bottles, it costs you 3 Ghana cedis. So if you subtract the 2 from the 3, it's 1. So it means that increasing your Sobolo from 1 to 2, you have increased your cost. Additional cost is also 1 Ghana cedis. So as you are getting additional revenue, you must also be getting additional cost. Because cost is an increasing function of your production. Once you want to produce more, your cost must increase. It is the rate of the increase that we often looked at. How is it increasing? Is it increasing more than the revenue? Marginal revenue product will increase. Once it is increasing, it means your marginal factor cost must also increase. But the increase, for you to determine your profit, it depends on which of the increase exceeds the other. If the marginal revenue product increase is greater than the marginal factor cost increase, then we'll say that you are going to make profit. They'll both increase, but you have to ensure that the revenue side is increasing more than the cost side. Of course, you may be enjoying economies of scale, which will cause the marginal factor cost to be falling, even as the marginal revenue product is rising. But that is a long run situation or phenomenon. Then we have marginal productivity of labor. Marginal productivity of labor. The marginal productivity of labor, what we call marginal product of labor, you know, these concepts are concepts you've looked at or you dealt with in your both principles and elements, right? But we want to recap them so that we can apply them in whatever we want to do. So the marginal product of labor is how changes in your total output, you know it to be this: change in KO over change in L. I hope you remember this. If you have a production function, which is a function of capital and labor, to produce an output KO, it depends on the amount of capital, like the machine, the building, the land you have to buy, and the labor. The labor constitutes both human resources and material resources, like water, raw materials you have to use, anything that could change your cost anytime you are changing its usage is classified as part of the labor input. So if I want to know how output is going to change if labor is changing, then you use the concept we call the marginal productivity concept. So the marginal product of labor simply means that how changes in labor, increasing labor from 1 to 2 to 3, is going to change the level of output. If you have a pure water factory and initially you've hired one person to be working in this factory, the final thing that you're looking out for is KO. The KO represents the water that you are going to bottle or put in a sachet and sell at the market. So water, sachet water, is your KO. And now you have employed one person. You want to understand the contribution of that one person you have hired. That is what we call the marginal product of labor, the additional contribution of labor from the last unit of labor employed. So if I increase labor, how is that going to increase my output? If I decrease labor, how is that going to also affect my quantity of water that I want to bottle per day? That is what we call the marginal product of labor or marginal productivity of labor. I know you did this before, you've made this before in principle 1 or element 1. So we are just recapping. Then we have employment. Employment, a situation where people are not employed, but they are actively looking for a job. The word is this: actively looking for a job. So if you are not actively looking for a job, but you want a job, you are not part of the unemployed. You should be of age. You should be actively looking for it. So when a survey is being conducted regarding unemployment, they'll ask you, in the last 2 weeks, have you engaged or been engaged in any active economic activity, even casual work or temporary, whatever? Once your response is yes, then it means you are employed. Within the period the data is being collected. But if your response in the last 2 weeks is that you have not worked and you are not also looking for a job within those periods, you are classified as unemployed. We don't care if you are going to change your mind tomorrow. It is also one of the challenges or the limitations when it comes to measurement of unemployment. So the unemployment rate figures that we see often is challenging because of how the question is being posed. Today, I'm getting some construction work doing. So you ask me, am I engaged in any meaningful employment in the last 2 weeks? Because of the construction work, which has an end, I said yes. So you captured me as part of the employed. But when this construction work ends in the next few months, I am now unemployed. But you will not come back to me and come and ask me again. So we have a lot of people who were once captured as employed, but now they are unemployed. So to get accurate data on unemployment and employment, it should be very regular. It should just be like the way we capture population data by metrics. We know that by SASCA service computation, we are 30.8. But when we look at metrics, we may be far beyond that. From the time 2021 to date, a lot of people have grown. Have given birth. And that adds up to the population. So we have a metric that captures population daily, every day. And that is how I think employment and unemployment should also be, so that we can get accurate figure and work with. So that if you want to know the rate of the rate of unemployment, the percentage of people within the population that are unemployment, you divide the number of people who are unemployed by the number of people in the labor force. So unemployed people divided by the labor force, okay, will give you the unemployment rate. If you multiply this by 100, then you get the percentage of people who are unemployed. Some theories of unemployment, we have the classical unemployment theory. The classicals, as you've learned in principle 2, principles of macroeconomics. Classical unemployment, or the classical people, believe that every economy at every point in time in the long run is at full employment. Full employment means that all human resources all material resources have been employed. There is no redundant resources. There is no resources that you say that, oh, I have this forest that is not being used, or I have these machines that are lying idle that I'm not using. There's nothing like that when it comes to the classical case. So in the long run, everything within the system is being employed. So if you have employed all your resources, and all your resources can produce 4,000 tons of, let's say, cocoa, it means you cannot go beyond 4,000 tons. So if the number of people in this economy, when you can produce 4,000, is 200 individuals. If the number of individuals increase to 2,010, this extra 10 people, there's no way you can increase production from 4,000 to 4,000 and something, so that the extra 10 people can also get some of the cocoa to either buy or to eat. Because the economy is already at full employment. There is no other resources to produce for the additional people that are entering or that are coming into the population, according to the classicals. So it means that these additional 10 people are going to force price levels of cocoa to go up. Because 200 is okay for the 4,000 is okay for the 200 population. Now population is 210. We are supposed to increase the cocoa production beyond 4,000. So this additional 10 people will create shortage, and that will force the price of cocoa to go up. So they believe that there's flexible wages and prices. Flexible wages and prices. So if all 210 are competing for this and the price is rising, they will begin to reduce the quantity that they want to buy, and that will bring the price level down. So they believe in flexibility of wages and prices. And as you know, they also don't believe in any government intervention. Whenever there's unemployment, they don't believe that government should be the one to solve the unemployment issue. The forces of demand and supply must work out. So market self-equating or self-correcting. So what I mean here is that if demand and supply must always be equal in the long run, according to the classical unemployment. In that, if supply is 200 or 2,000, it means given all the resources of this economy, they can only produce 2,000. If the population or demand is supposed to be 2,000, then there will be equilibrium. But situation where demand is increasing to 2,400, they believe that government should not do anything. The system will readjust to self-correct. How? How that is going to happen is, once demand is greater than supply, it is going to force price to go up. If price rises, it means that I should, as rational as I am, be reducing the quantity that I have to buy. If 2,000, when demand was 2,000, the prices are 2 Ghana cedis, and I am buying 10. Now we need 2,400 because of maybe an increase in population. But the economy can only give us 2,000 due to full employment of labor or of resources, or full employment of production. Price is rising to 5 Ghana cedis. It means I cannot be buying the same quantity I'm buying at 2. If I am a rational human being, I should reduce my quantity because the price is high. So if I am reducing, you are also reducing. It brings us back to the 2,000, where demand will be equal to supply. Government should not intervene. It shouldn't influence anyone to produce more. So firms cannot produce more when even price levels are rising due to the classicals full employment assumption, which is this one. So just like you have only 10 acres of land and you're a cassava farmer, the 10 acres, you have used everything. You have 4 laborers, you have used all of them up to their full capacity. And with the 10 acres, you can only produce 50,000 tons of cassava. Now population has increased. The population is looking for 100,000 tons of cassava, but you can only do 50,000 because you have no way of expanding your production process. So it means it is going to force the price of your cassava to go up. And once the buyers cannot buy at that high price, they'll begin to reduce their demand. And that will force the price to come down until it matches up. This assumption is not realistic, as I know you have done or you can remember of in principles of macroeconomics. It is not realistic. That is why the Keynes model also came in. Now let's look at how the classical situation defines or explains the issue of employment and unemployment. The top diagram explains or looks at relationship between output and employment. And the down one looks at relationship between employment and real wages. Wages, nominal wages over price level is called real wages. Real wages means the value of the wages that you are receiving, the actual amount of goods and services that you can use your wages to purchase. That is the real wages. It is always good to measure all economic variables in their real terms, because that really shows or reflects the actual value of what you have. So let's begin from the down. This is the demand and this is the supply. As you know, demand is downward sloping, supply is upward sloping. Where demand and supply meet, that will give us the equilibrium wage. And if you trace it down, it will give us the number of factors or the number of people who are being employed. So like we have normal demand, which is A minus BP, and normal supply, which is minus A or minus C plus DP. This is also demand curve. When it comes to labor market, we have demand for labor. Demand for labor, which will take the shape of normal demand. We can say A minus BW, where W is the wage. Instead of saying price, we use wage to determine to represent the price. Then supply of labor is minus C plus DW. Okay, instead of price, we use wage to represent that. Okay, and you remember when you find equilibrium price and quantity, you have equilibrium price here. This should have been our equilibrium price. Now it is rather wage. And this is your equilibrium quantity, and we are calling that employment. So demand for labor or employment. Labor or employment. Okay. So how does this equilibrium condition or situation influences the amount of output that the firm can produce? If a firm wants to produce the highest quantity, then it should be at a point where the number of people you want to hire is equal to the number of people you have hired. So supply of labor is equal to demand for labor. So at this point, if you pay workers this wage and employ this number of workers, then the highest amount of output or commodity you can produce is going to be this scale. This is the highest quantity you can produce. If you keep on employing more labor, if you demand for more labor, this is what will happen. If you increase labor demand and produce this number of people, if I project this up, you see that this part of the curve is going to be like this. It's going to drop like this. So as I keep employing more labor, the contribution that labor would add on board or to output will be falling. Please, can you see that?
Yes, Doc.
Good. So labor will be adding less to total output because output will be falling. So to employ the right amount of individuals or workers is very critical or is very relevant when it comes to the labor market. In the case of the classical economist, employ the right people. Once you employ the right people, you produce the right quantity and you make the right profit. But if you employ beyond what is expected, it means that additional people you have employed will contribute nothing. So look at it this way. Your office space can contain 4 people, but you end up, and the work available is supposed to be done by 4 people. If you employ that 4 people, they will give you an output or outcome that will help you maximize your profit. But if you employ 6 people instead of 4, but your office space can contain only 4, the additional 2 people may not work up to their full capacity. Productivity and efficiency from those 2 people will be very low, right? So that will mean that these people are going to give you this side of the curve where their contribution will be in the downward side. They'll be contributing nothing to the production process. It looks like first come, first serve. If you are able to come early, you get a seat. If you don't come early, you hang around. You play with your phone. But at the end of the month, you are going to be paid. So it means you are paying the person, but you are not getting the needed productivity from this person. So unemployment occurred when the real wage is above W, right? When real wage is above W, unemployment is going to occur. So this is the real wage. Any wage higher than this W over P will create unemployment. So that is why when I increase demand for labor up to this side, it means that I have to pay higher wage. Wage will increase. So if I project this up, that is going to be part of the unemployment side. So as I keep increasing, I am going to create unemployment. So employment is the reason why it is going to create unemployment is the fact that at this higher wage, the person cannot pay. So he has to either lay off workers or should refuse to employ more people. So this side will create unemployment, while this side is employment. That is the portion of individual that the person can hire. And what could cause this unemployment or this higher wage to occur? What could cause the wage rate to rise or unemployment to occur? This could be through trade unions or labor unions. When they embark on strike or they bargain for higher wages, once that wage rises, it is going to force the level of employment to also fall, since the firms cannot employ as much as they have to. So due to trade union activities, organizations, or enforcement of minimum wage. So it is not only trade unions that can cause this, also the tripartite committee, the activities can also cause this. That is why, in my mind, I think they are very careful whenever they are increasing the minimum wage. The reason why the minimum wage is increasing by just 1 Ghana cedis or 1 cedi 30 pesos, okay, 1 cedi or 1 cedi 30 pesos, and that's not gone beyond 2 Ghana, 1 Ghana, that's not gone up to 2 Ghana cedis, maybe because of some of these things. Because once they increase the minimum wage, it means every organization or every employer is expected to comply. You have to comply. If you are paying them 20 Ghana cedis per hour, per day, and minimum wage says that it is now 25 Ghana cedis, it means the least you can pay this person is 25. And the person you are paying 30 must also get an increment. The person you are paying minimum of 50 Ghana cedis must get an increment. And that will burden the company or the employer, which may lead to unemployment or refusal to employ more people. So this is very critical. So both government policies and trade union organizations could cause the minimum wage to rise above the equilibrium level. And when that happens, unemployment will occur. Unemployment will occur. So that is the classical case. Then the Keynesian unemployment. Keynes is of the view that the way the classicals stipulated or established what causes unemployment is wrong, or employment is wrong. Keynes believed that there's nothing like full employment. There's nothing like full employment. Said at every point in time, the economy is not at full employment, which means that there's definitely ideal resources that can be employed anytime there's increase in demand. So the example I gave as somebody having 10 acres of land for cassava cultivation may not is not what is not true in the case of Keynes. Keynes is saying that at every point in time he has more than 10 acres, so that if demand is increasing, he can expand. But the only thing is that resources are rather scarce instead of fully utilized. The scarcity of resources rather than non-existence of resources. So to Keynes, efficiency wage theory is what we have to use to determine the employment, the full employment, or what causes unemployment within an organization or within an economy. So he said that we must start from the efficiency wage theory. And what is the efficiency wage theory? Efficiency wage theory is saying that every employer will employ you and pay you up to your level of productivity. Means that the value of the value marginal product of labor, which means your productivity level, should be equal to the wage that you are being paid. This is the Keynesian unemployment. So anytime the wage is going beyond the value marginal productivity, then unemployment is going to occur. So employers start from this theory. What is your qualification? You have a degree. By law, how much is a degree person supposed to be paid? In my mind, what is the productivity level of the amount I am going to pay you? Maybe if I'm paying you this amount, 3,000 Ghana cedis a month, then this are the works that you have to do for me. Which means that the work you are doing for me, which is the value that I'm getting from you, the value of your additional contribution, is equal to the amount that I am paying you, which is the 3,000 Ghana cedis. So that is where the the Keynesian unemployment model starts from. So productivity of workers depend on the real wage rate. And imperfectly competitive firms respond to the relationship by employing few workers. So once the value I am getting from you is equal to your wage, I employ up to this. You can use this formula to determine L. You can use this formula to determine L or find the value of L, where L is the number of workers you have to hire in order to maximize your profit. If you hire beyond this L, you are going to find from this equation, it means you are going to overemploy, and that will cause a fall in your returns. If you also hire less than this L, which is unemployment, you are going to also get less. So the curve is a quadratic curve. It's a curve that goes like this, goes like this, and comes this way. It's like this. This is the highest amount of people you have to hire, L, so that you can get the highest profits. So that you can get the highest profit. If you keep on increasing the number of people to hire, see your profit will be falling. If you also employ below this L, it means that your profit will also be low. So you have to keep on employing more until you get to this peak. Any additional employment will lead to a fall in your revenue. Sorry. That's what you call the marginal productivity theory of labor. So there's always that maximum amount of people that you have to hire. If you don't know and you employ beyond that level, that is going to cause a fall in the profit or the return that you have to make, because you'll be using almost all the money to be paying workers. Meanwhile, the productivity level of the worker is less than how much you are paying the person. I think is it 2021 or 2022? Ghana's ASCA service, I forgot the year, so I stand to be corrected with regards to the year the report was published. They conducted a study and they found that a number of public sector workers receive salary below their level of productivity. And those of you who can remember, there were a lot of backlashes on the ASCA service. Okay, when people are calling for increment in their salary because living standards are falling, and you are telling them that they are taking salaries above their productivity level. What the ASCA service simply is saying is that the value marginal contribution of labor is less than the wage that labor is receiving. So labor is receiving more salary than his contribution. What can also bring unemployment is when there's deficiency in labor demand. Or the reason why labor will be unemployed will be dependent on the goods and services that you are using labor to produce. The price of goods and services or demand for goods and services you are using labor to produce. So for example, if you have employed 20 of us and you are using us to produce let's say laptop, right? To produce laptops, and demand for laptop is falling, then it means that you cannot produce more laptop, and therefore you are likely to lay some of us off. So if you've been employed, the activity you are engaged in to support your employer, its lucrativeness or demand for that will influence your salary. It will influence your stay to continuously work for the organization, and it will also influence whether the organization can employ additional people. Because what I'm using you for, they are not buying. Why do I have to still keep you, or why do I have to still employ? So demand for the goods and services you are using labor to produce can also create demand for labor deficiency. I will demand less labor if I am getting less from the production process. And I'll demand more for labor if what I am using labor to produce, there's market, or there's sales, or there's higher demand for it. So Keynes believed that every worker starts from the efficiency wage theory, where he will employ you and pay you salary equal to your productivity level. So that anytime your productivity level is less than the salary I am paying you, then it calls for me to lay you off. Unemployment will occur. And the second thing is that when what I am using you to produce demand is low, it can also cause me to lay you off. So there is what we call the gap unemployment, the gap between the number of people you can employ at equilibrium and the number of people you have to lay off when demand is falling. So let's use this diagram to explain that. So the Keyesian unemployment model, which we just examined, is interested in showing relationship between wages, employment, and labor demand, as well as supply. Wages, employment, labor demand, and supply. If we assume that the wage rate is fixed at W, okay, the wage rate is fixed at W, then the economy is never going to be at full employment. Anytime you fix the wage rates at W, it is going to affect the level of employment. So let's look at how that happens. So at W, the firms are willing to hire only N, which is 0 up to N. If wage is W, the amount of labor that firms are willing to hire is from 0 up to N. This is the equilibrium. Let's call that DI. All right. So it means that supply will be here like this. This is going to be supply. So this is where the equilibrium is going to be. All right. So firms are willing to hire only N when wage is W. However, the number of workers, or the workers in this economy are willing to work, or you have more people who wants to work. So it means that they want to work at this, up to this point. You have supply increasing like this. Supply is increasing. This is the initial supply. Now supply is increasing to this, and that will mean that people are willing to offer more of their hours or more of their time to work. Meanwhile, the firms are willing to employ only N. So there's a gap between this, the willingness to work, and then the willingness to employ. So the gap between N and NF is what we call the Keyesian involuntary unemployment. It is involuntary because it is not anyone's making. It is not intentional. It is not deliberate. It is not planned. It happened involuntarily. This is the number of people I want to hire based on my capacity as a firm. But the number of people who want to work are NF. So there's a gap. The gap between this N and NF is what we call the Keyesian involuntary unemployment. So if N is 40 and NF is 70, so it means that 70 minus 40, so 30 people are going to be unemployed. So 70 people want to work, but the firms are willing to hire only 30 people and pay a wage of W. What could cause this 30 people to be absorbed, right, would be when to the firms the wage rate falls. If there's a fall in the wage rate or any subsidy granted to the firms could help them to employ more. So that is why we often want to see government support. Government must be supporting firms, must be assisting them, must be giving them some subsidy, either in the form of tax exemptions or tax holidays or tax reductions, or direct capital injection into their businesses, so that I can give them relief to be able to employ more of the people government is supposed to be employing. So unemployment is denoted by the gap between N and NF. The gap between the willingness to employ and willingness to work. But we can achieve this full employment equilibrium. The system can employ up to NF if and only if government implements some policies. So government policies can help achieve this. An example is what I've just said. We can grant these firms tax holidays so that it can reduce their cost of production, right? You can also give them direct injection or some subsidies in any form that will aim at minimizing their cost of production so that they can employ the excess of 30 that is unemployed. So unemployment issue cannot be solved by only government, but government policies can help solve unemployment issues. If government is encouraging private sector to employ more or to help government absorb the excess labor force, then it means that government must also put policies, both fiscal and monetary policies, as well as tax policies. Of course, with the tax policy the same as fiscal policy. So both monetary and fiscal policies in place to enable firms have conducive environment, have very friendly production environment where their cost of production will always be low, for them to be able to expand production and employ more people. Monetary policy, I'm talking about interest rates. Government must ensure interest rate is at the barest minimum, where firms can borrow more to expand and employ. So government policies are very critical if unemployment issues would have to be dealt with. Other types of unemployment, which we have learned also in principles, the disguised unemployment, the fractional, structural, demand deficient, seasonal unemployment, and then the residual unemployment. These are types of unemployment that I know you are so much. Okay, maybe let's take one or two. Okay, so let me take which one? Okay, fractional unemployment. We know that fractional unemployment only occurs just because there is a gap between the person looking for the job and the person looking for the employee. So the period within which the employee and the employer are looking, okay, that missing period they are looking for each other is a frictional period. You surely get a job as just ended national service personnel, but it will take time. There's somebody looking for you to hire you, and you are also looking for somebody to hire you. Therefore, That missing period is what we call frictional period. Or I am working in Unilever and now I'm not interested in that job. I'm looking for another job. So I quit Unilever and I'm looking for another job. That is also a frictional period. It will take a little while for you to get that new job. So that's what we call a frictional unemployment. It's just a matter of time. It's a missing chances between the employer and the employee. And then the structural unemployment is as a result of changes in the economy, the whole economic system. If the ways that you are using, the methodologies, the approaches you are using in production has changed to a new way, then it means that you need a new set of knowledge to be able to carry on with production. So if I am a carpenter who uses this hacksaw blade and whatever to always be doing sheet sawing in showing the wood, and now there's a new technology that we use in doing that, I have no knowledge of using it, then it means that at a point in time I have to be rendered unemployed because I cannot move pace to the level of knowledge or technology that is in existence. It will take time for you to adjust. So when the entire economic structure changes, it could be changes in demand, it could be changes in the level of technology. Like today, AI is driving the economy. AI has changed the structure of a lot of economies. Artificial intelligence, the robots, okay, they have all changed the way things are done within economies. So once the method used in doing something in economy change to a new one, those who cannot adjust to that new changes will be laid off. Demand deficient unemployment occurs because there's low demand for goods and services in the economy. If the biggest sector that is employing is, let's say, manufacturing, and what the people are manufacturing, people are not buying, demand is low, then it means that they cannot keep employing and they cannot keep the existing workers. They must lay off. Seasonal, as you know, some employment are very seasonal in nature. Once the season is over, unemployment must occur. Then lastly is the residual. Residual means that it will be very hard for an economy to achieve full level of employment. So when the economy is near potential or near full employment level, there will definitely be some people who may not be employed. What we call the residual unemployment, we can classify that to be the natural rate of unemployment, which is that 5%. If an economy has 5% of its population unemployed, we classify that economy as having full employment. So that percentage of the population that may not get job, even though the economy is near full employment or is almost at full employment. So I can say natural rate of unemployment. There are some people who, hello?
Yes, sir. So please, I would want to inquire something.
Sure.
Okay, so you said that when a population is having 5% or less than its
Yes.
population to be unemployed,
Yes.
we assume that population to be
Naturally.
a,
Yes.
a full employment, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm asking, assuming a country is having, let's say, 10% or 20% of its population to be the workforce or the employable population. And out of that employable population, 5% of them are yet to be employed. Are we still to consider it as full employment?
Okay. So you mean that that's a very good question. You mean that the entire population, they have the labor force is 10%, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
The
sir.
entire population, labor force is 10%.
Yes.
And those who are employed are 5%.
Yes.
So the remaining 5% are unemployed.
Yes.
Can we say that is the natural rate of unemployment?
Okay,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, we can say so. But this is not too realistic in real world. Okay. So
Okay, sir.
yeah, it is. Yes, that is the case. If the total number of workforce is 10% and those who are employed is they cannot be 5%. If you say 5%, then it means that 95% are unemployed. So that 10%, you have to consider it as 100.
Sure.
Are you getting it?
Yes, sir.
You have to consider it as 100 so that you will assume 95% are employed.
Oh, okay.
But if you say 10% are in the labor force, it means we are capturing that 10% as 100%. Those people who are qualified to work. Then we can do the calculation and find 5% of those people who are not employed. So it cannot be correct that it is 10%, 5% here, 5% there. That
Oh,
would
okay.
be, yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. So workers' packages, okay, workers must also receive some packages or some package when they are employed. The package can be what it is due them, right? Like my actual salary that I have to receive, or it can be some programs to take care of me when maybe I am in need or when something happens or when the organization is collapsing or whatever. So anything to cushion or to keep me safe, what we call the safety net. So we can say safety net, okay, that will keep this worker not to deteriorate the workers' living standard. These are the working or the workers' package we're talking about here. And one of them is unemployment insurance benefit. Even though in our party here, we don't have it. We don't have unemployment insurance benefit in Ghana. Okay, but other economies, they have it. If you are not employed, you receive benefit every month. I know of US has it. Copenhagen, they have it. For Copenhagen, I was told most of their people even don't like working. They are lazy because of this unemployment benefit. Yes. So unemployment insurance is one of the package. Workers' compensation benefit, disability benefit, full replacement. The full replacement means that, for example, if I become unemployed due to a circumstance that is not my fault, then the company would decide to maybe pay me 100% of my salary. If I'm receiving 1,000 Ghana cedis, even though I'm being laid off or unemployed, they'll give me my 1,000 Ghana cedis every month up to a certain number of years or a certain number of months. Okay, so you've been laid off, but you are still receiving your full salary. This is called full replacement, and it is not very common in our part here, unless maybe you are a very hardworking person in that organization, an asset, and due to your work, you get injured or you became disabled or your work damaged certain part of it, which you cannot work, then maybe the organization can have that kind of package for you. You are not working, you're working for them and you got injured. Stop work, stay home, we'll still pay you. This is full replacement. Then we have actual income loss and scheduled benefit, right? Relief programs, and then the revised welfare system. The revised welfare system could be how pensions are paid. You can revise how pensions are paid. You can revise the kind of benefit that you have to receive, right? So these are some of the compensation packages which I know most of you in your organizations, you are applying them. If for nothing at all, workers' compensation benefit is always there. All right. Now, let's look at demand for labor. Demand for labor. When I say demand for labor, just put variables that you are changing from the definition that you know about demand for goods and services. Demand for goods, we talk about price, we talk about quantity, we talk about willingness, and we talk about ableness. So these four variables are the key variables when you are defining demand. The same thing applies here. Instead of saying price, you say wage. Instead of saying quantity, you say number of workers or persons. And the willingness and able must still be maintained. Willingness and ableness, or willing and able, must be maintained. So the only thing you are changing is price and quantity to wages and number of people employed. That is the definition of demand for labor. So the amount of hours of work or the number of persons an employer is able and willing to hire. The buy, you can say hire, is willing and able to hire at a given wage rate. Instead of saying at a given price, is at a given wage rate. Is willing and able to buy. If you are buying, it means you are hiring. So that is the definition for labor demand. And the labor demand curve will show the quantity of labor demanded by employer at each of the wage rates. So just as we look at demand for goods, this is the demand for quantity demanded, and this is the price. Here we put wage at where price is and put labor demand at where Q is. So if you are paying me wage of W1, then I will also supply you labor L1. If you reduce my wages to W2, then I can employ more labor. So labor increase to L2. If wages are increasing to W3, then the employer will not employ more. You employ less, WL3. So if you draw a line passing through this locus, you have labor demand curve being a downward sloping curve. So the demand for labor curve is just as demand for goods and services, or demand for goods. Let's say 40 minus 3W, where the 40 is like our A, the 3 is like our B, the W is like our price. Labor demand curve. So we know that anytime there's increase in wage, it is going to reduce the desired level of employment by the firm. Firms reduces the amount of labor to hire or number of people to employ anytime there is a rise in the wage. So that is why you saw that once the wage rate increases to W3, the amount of labor hire also reduces to L3. But once it fell to W2, amount of labor hire increase. So the reason why firms will reduce the desired employment level are because of scale or output effect and substitution effect. Because anytime wage rate increases, anytime wage rate increases, the scale effect or output effect is that an increase in the wage rate is going to increase your cost of production. Once cost of production increases, then you have to reduce the output that you produce. So an increase in wage rates will lead to a decrease in output or production, what we call the scale effect. And once production is reducing, then I have to reduce the number of people that I will employ. So employment will fall. Or there will be an increase in unemployment. Unemployment will rise. Then we have the substitution effect. The substitution effect means that if wage rate increase, assuming I am using two factors, and the wage rate for one of the factors goes up, then I would reduce demand for the factor whose wage has gone up, and increase demand for the factor whose wage remain unchanged. It's just like income and substitution effect. You have two goods that you are consuming. You are consuming mangoes and pineapple, and you combine both to form a juice, manpo, meaning mango and pineapple juice, manpo. It means mango is a factor, pineapple is also a factor. The price you pay for buying each mango can be determined as, can be called also the wage. And the price you pay for each pineapple can also be wage. So for example, if the price of mango goes up, then you are likely to reduce demand for mango to increase demand for pineapple, provided feasibility is there, provided it's possible for you to use more mango, or provided mango and pineapples are substitute. Let me put it that way to summarize. Substitute means what mango can do, pineapple can also do. So I will be reducing the use of mango and increase the use of pineapple, which means that the individuals who are supplying me the mango, they are going to receive less wages, or they are going to get less income, whilst the individual supplying me the pineapple will get more income. So increase in wage rate, let's come to the side of humans. If you have two kinds of workers, you have the highly skilled workers, and then you have the low skilled workers in your organization. And the high skilled workers are always calling for higher salaries, right? This can force some institutions or some organizations to reduce demand for these high skilled workers and increase employment of these low skilled workers, and use them to produce a product that is of quite low quality compared to what you can do here. Because the highly skilled people will give you quality product, but you cannot afford them. And the high skilled people, the low skilled people cannot give you quality product. But because they are cheap, you are likely not to collapse, you are likely to go for more of these people and reduce the quality of the product. This happens especially if you produce two different products for two different markets. You know, some companies produce two different products. They have the product they produce for the rich people, and the same product, low quality for the poor people. All right. So if this is a situation that you are faced with, you are likely to reduce your supply or your demand for the workers whose wages are kept going up, and go for the low skilled workers. Let me give you a typical example. It is because of higher wages. That is why some companies don't hire accountants, somebody who have accounting background, someone who has finance background, someone who has human resource background separately to manage different departments. So he will use the finance person to do the accounting job, and use the same finance person to do the HR job because of higher wages. So if the cost of accountant is higher than finance person, you will go for the finance to manage the work of the accountant. I was having a conversation with somebody last month, and the person was like, he has a bank, he wants to employ, but the people he wants to employ, he wants people with HND. He doesn't want the degree people. So I asked him why he want the HND people but not the degree, or the poly people but not the university people. He said the poly people, they can do the work, and at the same time their salary will be low. He will pay them less. But if he goes for the degree people, he has to pay them more. You see? So this could explain why you see a particular bank having only the manager with either a degree or master's, but the rest of them, they have HND. So he felt that he will pay them less. He will not pay them as much as you pay the degree people. So this is the substitution effect. So if wages is going up so much in the case of those with certain qualification compared to others, they will go for those with the cheaper if you like, wages, and leave those with higher wages. So there will be unemployment in the sector where wages are high, or those with high qualification. What's employment to be created for those with low qualification, since they may not incur much in hiring such people? So what are the factors that causes shift in the labor demand curve? So just as we examine in principles factors that shift the demand curve, the same thing applies here. Factors that shift the labor demand curve. So changes in product price. If you are using labor to produce mobile phone and the price of mobile phone is increasing, then you will employ more labor. If you are using labor to produce mobile phone and the price of mobile phone is decreasing, then you will reduce labor. Demand for the final product. If demand for the mobile phone is increasing, then I will employ more labor. But if demand for the mobile phone is decreasing, then I will employ less labor. So one is the price of the product you are using labor to produce. And two is the demand for the product labor is producing. But the first two move together. Once price of the product you are using labor to produce is rising, then it definitely means that there's also going to be a rise in demand. Or it means that by implication, demand is rising. Because what to call the price to rise is when demand is exceeding supply. And suppliers will always supply more as and when there is increase in price of the product. So labor demand curve would increase if prices of the product is increasing. Elasticity of the demand for the final product. The shift in the demand for labor curve also depends on the elasticity of demand for labor, whether demand for labor is elastic or demand for labor is inelastic. If demand for labor is elastic means that a smaller percentage change in price leads to a bigger percentage change in quantity. So if this is the price and this is the quantity, and price is reducing by a small margin, see that it is increasing demand by a big margin. Hill is increasing by a very big gap here, whilst price is falling by a small gap. So the change in price is smaller than the change in quantity. I reduce price by a small fraction, and it is causing demand to increase by a large fraction. This means that demand for labor is going to be elastic. If demand for labor is elastic and you reduce price by a small margin, it will cause demand for the product to increase. And therefore, you have to also increase demand for labor. What I mean is, if I am using labor to produce, let's say, mobile phone, and demand for mobile phone is elastic, then it means that demand for labor that I am using to produce the mobile phone is also going to be elastic. So if the price of mobile phone falls by a small margin, it will increase demand for mobile phone to increase by a large margin, which means I have to also increase demand for labor by a large margin. But if it is inelastic, inelastic means that the demand curve will be steeper. It's going to be steep. So if I reduce the price, I have to reduce it by a very large margin. And the increase in quantity is very small margin. So inelastic means that the percentage change in price is bigger than the percentage change in quantity. If you reduce the price of the product by a very large margin, it will not increase demand by any huge margin. It will increase demand by a very small gap. That is inelastic. So the elasticity facing demand for the final product can also affect demand for labor. Then productivity of labor. If labor is more productive, then more will be hired. But if you are less productive, less of you will be hired. Percentage of labor cost in the total cost. So if percentage of your entire cost is 100%, your cost is 100%, and labor cost alone is 90%, then it means that you will employ less labor, and that would reduce the labor demand curve. But if the percentage of labor in the total cost is 10%, it means you are incurring less when you employ labor. Labor contributes less to your cost than other factors. This will make you employ more labor, right? Then the availability of substitute for labor. If you don't use labor, do you have any other substitute to use? For example, robots, AI, okay? There's tools or machines. Can they substitute for labor? The work that labor can do, do we have other method that we can use to do the same thing? Like using robots, using artificial intelligence, using tools or machines to do what labor is supposed to do. If I have to hire somebody to be spraying my farms for me, okay, use this agrochemicals to spray or to plant maize for me. But now there's a machine that can do same. It means that machine will lay off labor. So labor demand will fall if there's a substitute for labor or substitute of labor. So for us to determine demand for labor, we have to make some few assumptions. We want to determine demand for labor. We make some few assumptions. The first assumption is that you should always see the employer as profit maximization or profit maximizing firm. The main aim of the employer is to maximize profit. So when he's employing labor, he wants labor to help him or her to maximize profit. He's not employing labor because labor needs job to be able to survive, but he's employing labor because he wants to get profit using the labor. That is the first assumption. The second assumption is that the factors that are used in production are capital and labor. So if you want to produce any output, KO is a function of the amount of capital and amount of labor you have. So this determines your production function. So the production process is determined by two factors or two inputs. Then, thirdly, the only cost associated with labor is wage. So if you want to determine the cost of hiring somebody, it is the wage that you pay the person. You don't pay the person any insurance, those compensation things we talk about. We are assuming those ones don't apply. The only cost that you incur on labor is the wage you pay the person. The fourth assumption, input and output markets are competitive. So it means that when you go and get the raw materials, there are many sellers and there are many buyers, and no single person can influence the price. And after getting the raw materials and you produce or converted them to final product, which is the goods, you are also going to sell them in a competitive market. Also, there are many buyers and many sellers. So where you buy the factors of production, there are many buyers and sellers. And where you sell the final product, there are also many buyers and sellers. That is the assumption number 4. So if there are many, there's a competition in both markets, then it means that the labor market is homogeneous, which means all labor in that market have the same characteristics, they have the same quality, they have the same ability or intensity. No labor is better than the other. That's what we mean by homogeneous labor market. And the product market is also homogeneous. It means the firms produce similar goods. They produce similar goods. And once there's homogeneity in production and then homogeneity in labor supply, then it means that the quality level is the same, which means there's perfect substitute. If you cannot work, there's another person to work. What you can do, there are many people who can do the same thing. So it makes the prices of labor and output to be fixed. And the last assumption is in production process, technology is assumed to be constant. There's constant technology. If it is a particular software that you are using, it is that same software forever. It is constant. Any knowledge that you have do not change. So you cannot change the taste, the branding, or the quality of what you are producing because your technology will not change. You have the same technology for the entire process. So the labor demand in terms of real wage can be determined. We can also derive the short-run labor demand for the firm. So when we talk about labor demand in terms of real wage, we mean that you want to find the demand function for labor based on the real wage that you have to pay labor, not the nominal wage, not the W. W is the wage, which we call nominal wage. Nominal wage. And then W over P is the real wage. The difference between the nominal wage and the real wage is that the nominal wage is just monetary increment. All right? It does not take care of inflation. It does not take care of the actual value of the wage that you are receiving. But the real wage will adjust for price levels or will take into account the actual thing that you can use or the actual quantities that you can use this money to buy. So the real one defines your living standard. It defines how your living standard is actually going to be. Okay. So we can derive the labor demand in terms of real wages within the perfect competitive system. Remember, it is perfect competitive system or competitive system. One of the things you remember about perfect competition, which I know you did in principle, one is that price of the product is equal to the marginal revenue and is equal to the demand. It's equal to the demand, which means the marginal revenue will be equal to the marginal product. So this is the same as this. So if you know the marginal product of labor, That will become the demand curve for labor in this particular market. So I'm going to help us derive that shortly. So we want to look at the relationship between labor demand and real wages. And I said real wages is W over P. So it means that for you to produce an output, in this case, you are assuming it's a function of only labor. To produce an output is a function of only labor. And the cost of labor is the amount, the wages you are paying labor times the total amount of labor that you have hired. This is what we call the total cost of labor. So if I am paying you 2 Ghana cedis every day, and I have hired 4 people, then it's the 2 Ghana cedis every day times 4 will be my total cost for a day. That is exactly what I have established here. So we can now determine the profits of the firm using labor. Establish the profit function. You know, profit is total revenue minus total cost. Total revenue minus total cost. And total revenue is price times quantity. Price times quantity. And total cost here is the labor cost, which is WL. This is your cost. The K is this. K is a function of L. So it means that your profit will be P times F of L. This is the K minus your WL. If you be confused, you can take the F away and leave the L so that you will not be confused when I'm doing the differentiation. You can say P times L so profits is equal to P times FL minus WL. Now differentiate with respect to L. So change in profits over change in labor with respect to labor. We are differentiating with respect to labor. Is equal to, if you are differentiating with respect to labor, this is K. This is the total product. Change in L is the total product. So I'll hold this one constant and differentiate the F of L. It's the same as change in F over change in L. If I keep this, or maybe let me keep the Q so that it will make more sense to you. If I use a function, some may be confused. So I'm maintaining the Q instead of replacing it with the F of L. So if I differentiate profit with respect to labor, I'll keep P constant I know K is a function of L. So change in K over change in L minus, if I also differentiate with respect to L, I'll get only W. This is power 1. You multiply the 1 by W, that will be W. You subtract 1 from the power, that will be L power 0. Anything power 0 is equal to 1. So if I multiply 1 by W, I'm getting W. So you have this. Do you remember this? K is equal to 20 K raised to the power 0.4, L raised to the power 0.3. Do you remember this production function? We sometimes ask you to find marginal product of labor. Then you differentiate and say that change in K over change in L. Right? This is marginal product of labor. You multiply the power of the L by 20. So you get 20 you get 6 6. If you multiply 0.3 by 20, you get 6. Then you subtract 1 from 0.3. So you have K 0.4 and L. If you subtract 1 from this, you have minus 0.7. This is your marginal product of labor. So look at this. This is the same as what you have here. It's the same as change in Q, change in L. So it means that it is also the same as the marginal product of labor. So the marginal product, we can replace this with the marginal product of labor. So that change in profits over change in labor is equal to P times marginal product of labor minus W. Anytime you differentiate is 0. It's equal to P M P L. Then you group like terms minus W. So move the negative, you have W is equal to P M P L. Divide both sides by price, divided by P, divided by P. So price will cancel. So we have marginal product of labor to be equal to W over P. W over P is a real wage. So it means labor is in terms of real wage. The marginal product of labor is in terms of real wage. So the contribution that labor is bringing, the additional contribution of labor, should be equal to the real wages that you are paying labor. You don't have to pay labor beyond the real wages or below the real wages. So this is labor in terms of real wage. Okay. Now, there's another way you can also express this. That is when you want to derive the same thing that I've just done. Thus, if you want to derive the labor demand in terms of real wages, you can also use this approach. So you are setting up your profit function, which is your total revenue minus your total cost. You know that total revenue is price times quantity. So this is your total revenue, and this is your total cost. The total cost is cost of both labor and capital. Cost of both labor and capital. If you are using this, then you are saying that your K is a function of both K and L. The first one I did, it is a function of only L, but you still get the same answer. So if you expand this bracket, negative WL and negative R. R represents rent or interest. That is the reward for capital. The reward for capital is rent. And the reward for labor is wage. Reward for labor is wage. Okay. So if you want to consider your cost, our cost here is now cost of both capital and labor, not only labor, as I indicated above. This one is just the cost of only labor, but this is the cost of both capital and labor. So your C is WL plus RK, where this is the total cost of labor and this is the total cost of capital. That is what is in the bracket. So if you expand the bracket, negative will affect both. So you have this. The K is your production function. K is a function of K and L. So instead of the K, it is replaced with a function of K and L. So now you can differentiate with respect to labor so that you can find the labor in terms of real wages. So if I differentiate with respect to labor, it means I'm going to differentiate the profit function, this one, with respect to L. When I come here, I'll hold P constant and differentiate with respect to only L, not K. And that will give me change in F over change in L. So the F with respect to only L. Then I'll move again. Where I have L, I differentiate again. L is here. Okay. So if I differentiate with respect to L, what I have is negative W. So minus W. And equate this to 0. You will not differentiate K because that is not what you are looking for. You are looking for labor in terms of real wages. So you have P times change in F over change in L minus W is equal to 0. You can now group like terms, change in F, change in L is equal to W. And divide through by P, divide through by P. This cancels. Change in F, change in L is W over P. So this is real wage. And this is labor demand. So change in F, change in L is the same as marginal product of labor as I indicated here. It's the same as marginal product of labor. Okay. So it means that the marginal product of labor the marginal contribution of labor should be equal to the wage that you are paying the labor. If you multiply the contribution of labor by the price you are paying or you are selling the item you are using labor to produce. So I'm talking about this. We have P times MPL should be equal to W, which is weight. This means that at equilibrium, for you to determine the right amount of labor you have to hire so that you maximize your profit, then you multiply the amount of the price you are charging the product you are using labor to produce. Let's say I'm using labor to produce mango juice, and the price of the mango juice is 30 Ghana cedis. So that is the P. 30 Ghana cedis is the price of the mango juice. Then the marginal product of labor is the contribution of labor to the production process, which is determined as change in quantity over change in labor. This is how to determine the marginal contribution of labor. And this should be equal to the wage that I have to pay labor. Should be equal to the wage I have to pay labor. Or the marginal revenue product of labor should be equal to the marginal labor cost. It's the same thing, the same concept. Let me see if I can give some practical example. Let me give an example. So for example, let's assume this. We have KO to be equal to K 0.2 L 0.4, no 8, 0.8. K is fixed at 4 and L is 3. Okay, 10. K is fixed at 4 and L is 10. Okay, K is fixed at 4. Then the wage that you pay this person is 20. And the price of the good you are using labor to produce is 5. We want you to find the level of labor find the amount or the level of labor or the amount of labor to hire. The amount of labor you have to hire in order to maximize your profit. Labor to hire. To be able to solve this question, that is what I am explaining here. You have to establish this condition that the price times the marginal product of labor should be equal to wage before you can determine the amount of labor to hire. The condition is that the price of the product times the marginal product of labor should be equal to wage, W. So it means you have to look for marginal product of labor because you know the wage to be 20 and you also know the price to be 5, but you don't know the marginal product of labor. How do we find marginal product of labor? Is change in KO over change in labor. So you come to the KO function where you have L, multiply the power of L by anything in front. So if I multiply 0.8 by the entire function, I'll have 0.8. Maintain your K, subtract 1 from the 8. So you have L negative 0.2. This is your marginal product of capital. Sorry, labor. Now the question says that K is fixed at 4. K is equal to 4. So wherever you see K, you can put 4 there. So MPL is equal to 0.8 times 4 raised to the power 0.2 times L minus 0.2. So multiply 4 raised to the power 0.2. That will give us 1.3195. Multiply that by 0.8. So the whole of this will give us MPL is equal to 1.0556 L minus 0.2. It is not good to leave your function with a negative exponent. So you can bring the L down. Anytime you have this, a negative 1 over 3, you can bring the a down so that the negative exponent will change to positive. If I bring the a down, it will be 1 over 3a. If I want to move the a up, it will be a negative 1 over 3. That is the principle or the laws of indices. So I can say that marginal product of labor is equal to, I'll keep the 1.05 at where it is, divided by, I'll move L down. Then the negative sign changes to positive, 0.2. So this becomes my marginal product of labor. So I can now replace my marginal product of labor here, replace the 5 here, replace the 20 here, so that I'll make L the subject. So let me complete that. So still our condition, price times marginal product of labor is equal to wage. I know the price to be 5. The price is 5. You can see it here. Then marginal product of labor is this, 1.0556 times 1.0556 divided by L 0.2 is equal to wage, and the wage is 20. Is equal to 20. So now we are making L the subject. So multiply the 5 by the top. Multiply this 2. So times 5 will give us 5.278 all over L 0.2, and that is equal to 20. So cross multiply, you have this times this, which is 20L 0.2 is equal to 5.278. Make L 0.2 the subject. So we divide through by L 0. We divide through by 20. So L 0.2 is equal to 5.278 all over 20. So L 0.2 equals, so if you divide this by 20, we have 0.264. We are looking for L, not L raised to the power 0.2. So you can take the multiply the exponent of L by 1 over 0.2. So L 0.2 times 1 over 0.2. Remember, this is over 1. Is equal to 0.264 also over 1 over 0.2. So 0.2 cancel 0.2, 1 will cancel 1. So you have your L. Now, what is 0.264 raised to the power raised to the power 1 over 0.2. So we have 0.00128. 128. Good. Don't be bothered about the final answer, but what you have to follow is the step, or follow are the steps indicated. So if you want to find the amount of labor that you have to hire in order to maximize your profit, or the real labor versus real wages, this is the procedure you have to go through. So this L means that the amount of labor you have to hire in order to maximize your profit is 0.00128. Like I said, don't be bothered about the final answer. You know, I was just giving a rough example. Okay, because we cannot have zero labor. Okay, labor is not decimal. Labor is supposed to be whole numbers. So don't worry about what we got. So it means that if you hire more than this amount of labor, given the production function we have, or given what you really want to produce, this is what you want to produce. You want to produce scale by combining 20% of capital and 80% of labor. If that's what you want to produce, then the amount of, and you know the total amount of capital you want to hire for, but you don't know the amount of labor you have to hire in order to have a good combination to produce the right quantity you want. That is why you go through this process. And finding L means that the amount of labor you have to hire should be 0.0128. So if I now substitute K, which is 4, and L 0.0128 here, I can find the Q, the total amount of output that I have to produce. So firms must always be able to determine the right amount of labor that they have to hire in order for them to maximize their profit. Or else you either get below profit or you will overhire, and that will be detrimental to the profit that you have to have. So what we have here means firms must not hire, based on our question, the firm must not hire labor beyond this or below this. It should hire exactly this. Again, this is not a realistic something that if I give you a question, you should get. You get, let's say 5 point something, or yes, so that you can run it. Because labor is a whole, it's a discrete variable, not a continuous variable. Then in the long run, remember we said we have both labor demand in terms of real wages, that is what we just looked at, and we have the reversion of the short run labor demand for firms. We can also have long run labor demand for the firm. Let's recap the theory of production. In the theory of production, we've learned that in the short run, capital is fixed and labor is variable. Capital is fixed and labor is variable. That is why in the question here, I said K is 4. It's fixed at 4, but L can change. That is why we are looking for that L. In the long run, however, both K and L can vary. They are all variable. Both L and K can change. So if production is increasing in the long run, you can increase capital, you can also increase labor to meet the needed demand for labor. But if you are in the short run and demand is going up, the only variable factor you can increase is the labor, not the capital. 3 key assumptions. It is assumed that all factors of production are variable in the long run. Technology used by the firm in the production processes, again, constant. The input prices and the financial base of the firms are exogenously determined. It means that to determine the price of the input, it is outside the control of the firm. The firm cannot determine the price it pays for the input. It is not within its jurisdiction. And the financial base of the firms are exogenous. So it means you have little control over your finances, and your input price. If I say finances, I mean revenue you are going to make at the end of the period. You have little control. It will be determined by the forces of demand and supply. So if you are in the long run, then this is what will happen. In the long run, you have to have 3 different equations. You have to have 3 different equations. And you would use the 3 different equations to determine the equilibrium condition. Thus, you have also done this in level 200, only that we are applying it to labor economics now. Okay. So this is your production function. Your production function, and then you are going to differentiate your production function. You must also know your cost function so that you can also differentiate your cost function. But what we want to establish first here is the slope of your production function, what you call isoquant. I hope you remember isoquant. The combination of 2 goods. This is your isoquant, this is your isocost. Capital is here, labor is here. Isocost is the budget line. And isoquant is your production function. Your K is the isoquant. If this is utility, we say that in different scale. So where isoquant and isocost are tangent, you have the amount of capital you have to hire and amount of labor you have to hire. So you are hiring K amount of capital, L amount of labor to produce a certain amount of quantity called Q. And the slope of this isoquant is what we call the marginal rate of technical substitution. The slope of the isoquant is the marginal rate of technical substitution, which means that it defines the rate at which you can reduce capital to increase labor, or the rate at which you can reduce labor to increase capital. And the slope of the budget line, which we call the isocost, is the factor, the ratio of the factor prices, meaning the price of labor, which is the wage, over the price of capital, which is rent. That is the slope of the isocost. So at equilibrium, the slope of the isocost should be equal to the slope of the isoquant, marginal rate of technical substitution. And the marginal rate of technical substitution is marginal product of capital over marginal product of labor, or vice versa. So let me quickly take you through how that is derived. Please, if you have a question, you can draw my attention to that. I will allow you to ask, and I'll give you the response. So anytime you have a question, just draw my attention. I'll pause for you to ask. So K is a function of capital and labor. We are looking for the marginal rate of technical substitution. So we are going to apply a principle we call the product rule of total differentiation. We are going to differentiate this function total differentiation. Total differentiation means that it is both capital and labor combined that influences the effect of K. So we want to find the combined or the total effect of the two variables K and L on K. You differentiate output totally, but differentiate capital partially, changing K, changing F over changing K. K is partial differentiation of capital. This alone will give us the partial effect that capital has on output. But if we want to have the total effect of only K on K, then we have to multiply it by the total change in capital. So this symbol means partial change, and this symbol means total change. Plus, you also have to differentiate labor totally. So the partial change in labor times the total change in labor. Equate this to 0. From the graph here, you can see that K is on the vertical axis and L is on the horizontal axis. If you want to differentiate this, it is always the vertical axis over the horizontal axis, like this. So if you want to have it change in L over change in K, then the L must be here and the K will be here. So what we are looking for is, we are looking for change in K over change in L. Change in K over change in L. So from here, make change in K over change in L the subject, and that's it. So you group like terms. You have change in F over change in K times change in K is equal to, if I move this, it becomes negative change in F over change in L times change in L. Now I'm looking for change in K over change in L. So what do? All I have to do is to divide through by change in L. Divide through by change in L. So this will cancel, and I have change in F over change in K times change in K over change in L equals negative change in F over change in L. I am looking for change in K, change in L. So I can divide both sides again by change in F over change in K. Change in F over change in K. So this will now cancel this. So my change in K is equal to negative change in F over change in L all over change in F over change in K. Please note, change in F over change in L is the same as marginal product of labor. And change in F over change in K is the same as marginal product of capital. So it means that our change in K and change in L is equal to negative MPL over MPK. And this is what we call the marginal rate of technical substitution, which is the slope of isoquant. The slope of isoquant. So this slope is what we have derived. The slope here is what we have derived. That alone, so that's what we have here. That alone does not help us to determine the equilibrium condition. So for us to determine the equilibrium, then we need to also know the cost. We have to know the cost so that we can minimize this cost subject to our constraint, what we call our budget, our production function. Then we can solve and get the MPL over MPK to be equal to W over R, to be equal to this. So we have to also prove to get that. To do so, you have to set up a Lagrange function. So from here, we set up our Lagrange function. What we are doing is to determine the level of K and L that will maximize Q. Q is a function of K and L, while the cost is WL, which is the cost of labor, plus RK, which is the cost of capital. If you have to minimize, minimizing means that let the W times L plus RK be your objective function. L is Lagrange function. WL plus RK be your objective function, plus lambda, then your constraint will be your production function. You move K and L to cross the equal sign. You have F, K, and L. This is your Lagrange function. Now you differentiate this function with respect to L, with respect to K, and with respect to lambda, so that you can have three different functions. Okay, that's what we have here. So the Z is the same as my L, which I have indicated. Okay, maybe let me use Z to avoid the confusion between L, which is labor, and the Z. So you first have equation 7, equation 8, and equation 9. If you differentiate with respect to L, you have equation 7. With respect to K, you have equation 8. With respect to lambda, you have equation 9. Okay. So if I differentiate the function with respect to K, this is what I will have. I will have this. There's no K here, so I won't differentiate. But there's K here. If I differentiate this, I'll get R. I'll get R. Then there's also K here. If I differentiate K, let's call that FK. So if I differentiate K, I'll get FK. FK times lambda will be lambda FK. Let's equate this to 0. If I make R the subject, okay, let me leave it this way for now. Equation 1. Also differentiate with respect to labor. Now focus on L. If I differentiate L, I'll get W. There's also L here. I'll get minus FL times lambda will be lambda FL is equal to 0. Then the last one, this is equation 2. Differentiate with respect to lambda. If you differentiate lambda here, what you have is what is inside the bracket. So you have K minus F of KL, which is equal to 0. This is also equation 3. Now divide equation 1 by equation 2. Dividing equation 1 by equation 2 means that I'll divide this R divided by W, then lambda FK divided by lambda FL. You can also say divide equation 2 by equation 1. Whichever way you want to, your answer will not change. It's a matter of determining which one you are substituting for the other. So if I say 1 by 2, then it means that R divided by W minus lambda FK divided by lambda FL. They are all equal to 0. So you can say equal to 0. So you group like terms, RW is equal to lambda will cancel. You have FK over FL. Please note that FK is the same as the marginal product of capital, and FL is the same as marginal product of labor. So R over W is equal to MPK over MPL. While this is the slope of ISO costs, this is the slope of ISO quants. So this is the equilibrium situation or the equilibrium condition. So with this, if this is a proper question with this, we can find the value of K and the value of L from here, if a question is given, which I know with certainty that you are very familiar with this kind of calculations, since we did this in principles 1, or principles of micro, and principles and element of micro. So I'm only doing recap. So this equilibrium can be illustrated on a graph. This equilibrium can be graphically illustrated, and that is what I did here. Or let's do it here again. So this is the ISO cost, and this is the ISO quants. This equilibrium means that W over R is equal to what did I get? MPK over MPL. This is the equilibrium. So the amount of capital and amount of labor to combine to be able to produce the right quantity K, the right quantity K is you hiring K amount of capital and L amount of labor. That is equilibrium. If wages changes, it can have effect on how this curve will look like. If there's a change in wage, this curve will change or will have a different look, because you are using both capital and labor to produce an output kill. The price you pay for capital is rent, and the price you pay for labor is wage. But wage is either increasing or falling. It is going to affect the amount of labor you hire, and it's also going to affect the amount of capital you hire. If wages are rising, the person is likely to employ more capital and less labor. If wages are falling, he's more likely to employ more labor than capital, and this will influence the position or the shape of the curve that we just saw. So this is what we call substitution effect and scale effect. So anytime there's a change in wages, it leads to two different types of effect: substitution effect and wage effect. Substitution effect and wage effect. Two types of effect is realized anytime there's a change in wage. So let me demonstrate that. Let me demonstrate that. So this is the amount of labor and this amount of capital. The initial situation is this. This is your ISO cost. And this is your ISO quant. ISO quant or your kill. Where the ISO cost and the ISO quant intersect, determine the amount of capital and amount of labor you hire at equilibrium. Now let us assume that the price of, remember, labor is wage and capital is rent. Let's assume that the price of labor increase. So it means W has gone up. If W increase, then it means that now the firm cannot hire more. The firm cannot hire more labor. It will rather reduce the amount of labor hired. So because it is the price or wages that has changed, the isoquant curve will shift or will be pivotal. It will not rotate. It will rotate. It will not parallelly shift, but it is rather going to rotate or is going to be pivotal. So the new budget line is now this green line I have drawn. It depends on whether labor and capital are substitute or they are normal goods, normal input or inferior input. If labor is a normal input, then even as the price of labor increase, the firm will still hire more labor. But if labor is a normal input, an inferior input, the firm will hire less. The same thing applies to capital. If capital is a normal input, now that the price of wage is going up, the person will hire more capital, and the vice versa. So this is going to, because the wage has gone up, is going to force the firm to reduce the hiring of labor to rather increase capital. So we'll have the new indifference curve occurring anywhere here. So this is equilibrium. Capital is increasing to K1 but labor is falling to L2. Sorry, K2 and labor is decreasing to L2. So there's a fall in labor. There's a fall in labor demand, which is going to create unemployment because it is too expensive to hire labor since wages has gone up. So the firm is reducing the amount of labor to increase the amount of capital. If the economy, this firm chooses to produce at this point, let me call that E1 and call this E0. If you choose to be at E1, there is going to be less production in the economy because the indifference curve, sorry, the isoquant K1 is less than the isoquant Q0. So that is putting production to the lowest point, which will create shortage and the economy will not function properly. So what you do is you have to compensate the firm so that it can go back to the old production of Q0 instead of K1. So we call this compensation variation. So you draw a new budget line that will be tangential to the old budget line. Sorry, the old indifference curve. You draw a new budget line to be tangential to the old indifference curve. Like this. Okay, it should touch just a side, just one portion, or just a portion of the curve, not every part. It's difficult. Drawing this if you don't draw your curves well. Okay, so I'm struggling because of how I do my indifference curve. So maybe let me do it properly. Good. Good. So you draw a new indifference curve. So a new budget line or ISO cost. The reason why the new ISO cost should touch the old ISO quant is because one of the properties of an ISO quant is that point on the same ISO quant indicate the same level of satisfaction or the same level of output. So whether the firm chooses to produce at this point, let's call that E2, or it chooses to produce at E0, he is producing the same quantity Q0. So point on the same ISO quant indicate the same level of output. Just as in utility, point on the same indifference curve indicate the same level of utility. So now, instead of the firm reducing the level of labor to L2, if I trace this down, it is now reducing labor to L2, L3 instead of L2. So the magnitude of the decline has been reduced. But that should not reduce the level of quantity the firm will produce because he is only substituting the labor for capital to increase capital. So he's reducing labor from L1 to L3 so that he can increase capital from K2 to K3, which will all lead to the same level of production, Q0. So the movement from E0 to E2, E0 to E2 is what we call the substitution effect. E0 to E2, this is called the substitution effect. Then the movement from E1 to E2, E1 to E2 is what we call the scale effect. This, the scale effect. Scale effect. If this is utility, we say that income effect. In utility, we have substitution effect and income effect. Here we have substitution effect and scale effect. The scale effect affects the level of output that you produce. And then from E1 to E0, E1 to E0 is what we call the total effect. Total effect. The total effect means that if you add the substitution effect and the scale effect together, that will give you the total effect. That will give you the total effect. So that is what you have here. So E0 to E1 is the total effect from here to here. And then this is the substitution effect. And then this is the scale effect. All right. So it means that anytime you are using two inputs in production and the price of one of the inputs changes, it is going to have two different effects. The first effect is that it's going to cause you to reduce the use of the input whose factor price has gone up to increase demand for the input whose factor price remain either unchanged or decrease. Substitution effect. And the scale effect is the fact that it is both going to cause the same level of output to be produced, which is the isoquant remain unchanged. And combining the two gives us what we call the total effect. The total effect. Is there any question? Any question? Hello? Am I here alone?
No, you're
Hi.
not here.
Yes, we are here.
Alone.
Hello. Hello, we are there.
Okay, then let me hear your voices.
We are enjoying this so much, and so we wanted you to finish. If there is something new that we don't understand, that we come out with our questions.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Great. All right. So let's proceed. So we want to look at demand for labor curve under perfect competitive and monopoly market. Demand for labor curve under perfect competition and monopoly market. The way labor will be demanded in perfect competition will not be the same as how it will be demanded under monopoly. Remember, because monopoly always regulate the quantity they will produce, they are more likely to hire less people. They hire less labor and produce less output so that they can create shortage and prices will increase for them. They are less willing to employ more. They always want to employ less. But when it comes to perfect competition, because the market is saturated with a lot of producers, we are many in the market. So everyone is demanding for labor. So it means that perfect competitive firms are more likely to hire more labor and produce more than the monopoly. As established already, we have established this relationship already, that the marginal revenue product, which is marginal revenue times marginal product of labor. So MRP of labor is equal to marginal revenue times marginal product of labor. And at equilibrium, this should be equal to wage. Please, the marginal revenue is the same as price for a perfect competitive firm. For a perfect competitive firm, marginal revenue is the same as price. So if price is used instead of marginal revenue or the vice versa, don't be confused. is the same thing. So it's either I say P times marginal revenue product, marginal product, P times marginal product of labor, or I say marginal revenue times marginal product of labor. Because for a perfect competitive firm, okay, demand is the same as price, is the same as marginal revenue. So price is the same as marginal revenue for perfect competitive firm. So that is why they can price and marginal revenue can be used interchangeably. Okay. Then in terms of real wage, so here the wage is not real, it is nominal. In terms of real wage, it means that your marginal revenue product, this one must be divided by price, and your wage must also be divided by price. So it means that the real productivity of labor should be equal to the real wages labor is receiving in real terms. In the case of a monopoly, marginal revenue is not equal to price. This is only for perfect competition. For monopoly, marginal revenue is always less than the price. Marginal revenue is less than price. Maybe let me demonstrate that. Let's assume this inverse demand function. 10 minus 2Q. This is price. Inverse demand function. This is the price of a product. Let's now look for marginal revenue. We want to show this that marginal revenue is less than price, or price is greater than marginal revenue. Marginal revenue is change in total revenue over change in quantity, Q. So it means that we need to find total revenue. Total revenue price quantity. The price is known to be this. So total revenue will be the price 10 minus TR is 10 minus 2Q times Q. The bracket is the price and the Q is the quantity. So if we expand the bracket, we have 10Q minus 2Q squared. If we expand the bracket. Now, once you have the marginal total revenue, you can now find the marginal revenue. So differentiate the total revenue function with respect to quantity. So this is the marginal revenue. Apply the formula. So marginal revenue is differentiate the total revenue, which is this. Q is raised to the power 1. To differentiate means multiply the power by anything in front. That is by the 10. And that will give us 10. Now subtract 1 from Q1, Q power 1. That will give you Q power 0. Move to the next Q. Multiply 2 by 2. You have minus 4. Subtract 1 from the power 2. That will give us Q power 1. According to the principles of indices, anything raised to the power 0 is 1. And anything raised to the power 1 is the same thing. So if I multiply 1 by 10, I'll get 10. And so I'll get 10 minus 4Q. So this is the marginal revenue. Now compare the marginal revenue to the price. Price is this. P is equal to 10 minus 2Q. And marginal revenue is 10 minus 4Q. So you can see clearly that price is twice the marginal revenue. So indeed, P is greater than marginal revenue. Or if you like, find a figure. Let's assume Q is 2. Substitute Q at the marginal, 2 at the marginal revenue side. You have 10 minus 4 times 2, which will be 10 minus 8. And marginal revenue will be 2. Now substitute the same 2 at where you have the price. So P is equal to 10 minus 2 times 2. So we have 10 . So since the marginal revenue is always less than a monopoly's product price, it implies that the ratio of the marginal revenue is less than 1. It means it's less than 1. What that simply means is the first equation to the left of the labor demand curve for the perfect competitive firm. We mean that the demand for a perfect competitive firm will be about the demand of the firm. Meaning, if the same wage is supposed to be paid by both firms, because the monopoly is just a single firm and has the power to regulate how much to pay and how much quantity to produce, they will always hire less at equilibrium. They will hire L1 labor, while the perfect competitive firm at the same factor price of W, they will produce more or they will demand more labor, L2. Perfect competition, there are many firms, many buyers. Monopoly, a single firm, many buyers. So he has the power to control the amount of people to hire. I'm the only person who will need your services. So if you will not reduce your price, I will not hire you. And because they always want to maximize revenue, especially in the long run, they will make sure that they employ lower labor and produce lower quantities. So the output produced by the monopoly will always be less than the perfect competitive firm. Because to the monopoly, the more they hire, the more their costs also increase. So why don't I hire less and produce less, since I'm the only person selling the product in the output market? No matter the quantity I'll send, the price will increase and I'll get my money. So the monopoly has the power to manipulate both Q and P. If they want to increase their profit, they can choose to manipulate Q or manipulate P, but they cannot manipulate the two at the same time. So for example, if he wants to increase profits, he can decide that he will control quantity. He will produce less. He will not touch the price. He will produce less. And if he's producing less, means he will employ less. Once he produces less, there will be shortage in the market, and that will force price to rise. He will make his money. He can also decide to control price and leave quantity. Controlling price means that he will deliberately reduce the price, right? And then produce more. If he's producing more, means he has to hire more. He will produce more at a lower price, and then he will sell everything, because at a lower price, demand will increase. So they have the power to control both. Unlike the perfect competitive firm, they do not have the power to manipulate any. They cannot control price. They cannot control output. Okay, they can control output, but they cannot control price. Controlling output means that each firm can decide the quantity that they want to produce, but they cannot decide on the price that they want to charge. If you see prices changing for private competitive firms upwardly, then it means that it is an agreement by all the participants in the market to increase the price simultaneously. But a single firm do not have dominion over the price that it has to charge. Okay. This may not be the same if we consider a monopolist that is paying higher wages. So a monopolist that is paying a higher wages will mean that that monopolist is regulated, or they are regulating that monopoly. So for example, we know ECG is a monopoly, not a pure monopoly, but a regulated monopoly. And because of their monopoly, maybe they may decide that they'll pay their workers less. That cannot happen, because at the end of the day, government is regulating their activities. So they cannot do anything that is contrary to the labor laws. And also the fact that the work at ECG is not the only work that is in the economy. There are others. So people may find other alternatives. So this is indicating to us that in reality, there is nothing like a pure monopolist. A monopoly firm does not exist anywhere in reality. What you can see is a regulated monopoly, not a pure monopoly.
Doc.
Yep.
Doc.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we talk about the cocoa board in terms of the productions of cocoa in Ghana, as they are the parent and the others are subsidiary, to be a monopoly, institution?
Yes, it's a monopoly institution, but not a pure one. It's a regulated.
Okay.
Once we talk about a regulated monopoly, then we mean that government has control or oversight responsibility of what you do. Are you getting it? That is why, that is why government is always involved in how Cocoa Board does the pricing of the cocoa, the bag of cocoa for the farmers. But if you talk about a pure and a natural monopoly, then that is coming from the private side, a private firm, all right? A private firm that is giving that power to determine the price and whatever. That type does not exist.
So in the case of the family laws and the production, as far as the human production is concerned, can we set a marriage or more or less a household to be the monopoly in terms of production of the offspring?
Yes. Yes.
Because they determine the number of children that they're supposed to give.
Yes. So, but remember, it should be from the two, right? So you are talking about the two, not the head, right?
Okay.
We are not talking about only the man or only the woman, but the two of them.
So once we are household, the ones we are household, we are talking about a household, so we don't divide it.
Exactly. There's a model that we are going to learn maybe next week, the family utility model, right? Where the man's decision influences the decision of the woman when it comes to the labor market. We'll look at that next week. I think our time is up. Yes, okay. So let's respect the time. Okay. But please, next week, I beg you, let's join the class on time, okay?
Okay.
And I'm going to share the slides we've covered so far and the outline with you so that you can start revising as quick as possible.
Okay, sir.
All right. Thank you.
We appreciate you so much for good delivery.
I'm grateful.
Doc, are you able to join our WhatsApp platform?
Yes, I'm on your WhatsApp platform. I'll put it on your WhatsApp platform.
Doc, if possible, some past questions so that you know the trend of question setting.
It's a good suggestion so that we know the mode of the question.
Yeah, I'll try. I'll try and do that in the course of the meeting. Okay.
I know he's going to try more than you are promising us.
Have a beautiful day.
Thank you, Doc. God bless you, Doc.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, man.
Auntie Ellen, Auntie Hi, cry about me. Ellen, are you there?
Who that was busy? Will be open high. Oh, that guy was busy. Open high there.
My baby said, I thought you don't hire me any longer because we are over.
Oh, that guy was busy. Open high there. Yeah, the high.
So now I haven't seen your
Please,
goal.
please share the next link for us. The next course link.
You the call line is always busy.
Now you give me high for possibly.
The call your line always busy.
No. Maybe I went
you are good.
coverage area, so you give me high. For city didn't come today.
So I think couple was about high.
You. I think this lecturer is very good. We're going to catch some, the last question that we are doing is more or less it's advanced. This last one is advanced. So you're going to apply a lot of theories within the last stage for us to. So it's normal. We're going to learn it.
Echo master no drop master they come.
No, Echo master depend how he handle it, but not all of us are good in calculus. So, but anyway, we are only praying to pass through. But I think this one, once we got a pass question, we're going to, pass. We prayed so.
Yeah. So I know my trend learning when I'm going to theory of calculation. When I go for theory of calculation, I should know by now.
The statistics link is out.
Hey, now today.
Okay. There's a lot of it. Let me go off and see if.
Okay.
Mark. Mark.